Happy days, Tuesday, Thursday. Oh, hello there. Hey guys, what's going on? We're going to be doing something a wee bit different. And this was inspired by a particular professor that I happen to enjoy his content on YouTube. Here's the disclaimer, because we're going to conjecture ahead.
Although this is going to be weird, and it's going to be about a different.
Title of the conference was something like "Ground Truth" or "Turtles All the Way Down," and so it seems as though there's one Ruliad. I don't think it rules them all, and it might be just hyper-rulial turtles all the way down.
Yes, it's on the back of an infinite number of hyper-rulial turtles.
Various people are commenting on the outrage of hacking the universe on a MacBook Air.
Hey guys, memes here. So this was brought to my attention by a Mr. T. Carr, because he brought to my attention that Professor Carroll had tweeted this out. What the heck am I talking about here? Alright, so this is one of Professor Carroll's tweets. There need to be more YouTube reaction videos, but instead of people listening to a song for the first time, they're reading a physics paper. Well, since I totally do not meet expectations, I'm not going to be currently reading a physics paper in this one. It would require me to investigate and actually do a lot more research. So I'm going to review a PBS Spacetime video that some of y'all may have watched and I may have listened to a couple of times so far. Because I'm just listening to this and I had some questions. I think we're getting into quantum chromodynamics here, but I shall not belabor the point. Hey, welcome Whitechapel. Thank you for joining, my friend. Alright, so what the heck am I talking about? Well, I am talking about how does the nucleus hold together? Here we go. This is brought to us by PBS Spacetime. Oh no, I finished it. Hold on. It's a good thing we have the replay feature. So I'm going to click this, and as we get started, we must remember PBS Spacetime is brought to us by viewers like you. And
thank you to Rocket Bunny for supporting PBS. Two protons next to each other in an atomic nucleus are repelling each other electromagnetically with enough force to lift a medium-sized labradoodle off
Wait, a labradoodle? That's a lot of energy. They seem to be wee dogs. But those are two really small things. It was like 10 to the negative 15 meters or something. Continue, Matt.
Release this energy and you have a nuclear explosion. Just as well, there exists an even stronger force than electromagnetism holding our nuclei together.
Go on.
But it's not strong force as you might have imagined, at least not directly. Nuclei are held together by a quirk of nature, without which we would have no complex atoms, no chemistry, and certainly no labradoodles.
That would be terrible. Okay, so just real quick, because again, we want to do fair use, even though it's education. Even though it's PBS, you want to be respectful, right? And it's not just going to be me just ripping off their content and everything. We need to give some commentary here. Because fair use, fair use, fair use. I think that makes it okay. Welcome, Mr. CCDV. See, I think we've all had a whole bunch of different stuff and things happen over our lives. Some of them good, some of them bad. The exact percentages that happen to each and every one of us, well, that depends upon the individual. But we're going to continue here. All right.
Quantum chromodynamics is a complicated sounding name, but the fundamental force of nature that it describes, the strong force, is actually even more complicated.
Okay, so I think again, full disclosure, I am not a professionally trained physicist nor mathematician. I am a dude on the internet, but I've been fortunate enough to speak with a lot of really smart people and learn a lot over the past couple of years, including Professor Carroll. His biggest ideas in the universe when the plague hit, I'm literally just at work just listening to his lectures I have no idea what he's talking about, but at least when I was growing up, they said, well, if you want to learn a language that's foreign to you, you should immerse yourself in that culture. I never went on the trip up to Canada or over to Spain. I think that was the really popular one. But I don't know. So I'm just let me listen to all these smart people giving free online lectures, sharing their knowledge that they've gained over the years with the rest of us folks out here. I tend to think most knowledge should typically be free. I don't know. I guess I'm a dirty hippie. These things happen. But no. Here's the thing. What do we have? This is what they call color charge and stuff. And I'm doing some spoilers here. And again, this is just my interpretation. All right. You got red, green, blue. All right. So these are your quarks. So you got some stuff. What's holding them together? Gluons. So we got these gluon thingies. Okay. Stuff and things. But they seem to have both of a particular color charge. We'll just get into it. It's fascinating. It's exchanging things. It's getting virtual things. They're just kind of transversing. It's like, I don't know. Is it magic? Matt, tell us.
Sounds. In our previous episode on this topic, we saw how the strong force binds the elementary quarks into protons and neutrons.
Hey, awesome one.
But that's where we left it. Based on what we learned in that episode, the strong force is entirely confined to the nucleons. And yet somehow it's also...
The nucleons are like the actual... Wow. I'm trying to use the correct words. I was going to say the things in the nucleus. But then again, apparently, if depending on where you measure an electron, there's a percentage chance that it might be somewhere out to infinity. Doesn't mean that it's infinitely close as well. Oh, but I think 3 plus 1 technically equals all of us. So I'm just saying for clarification. We want to be accurate. I actually don't know. Continue.
the force that binds protons and neutrons together to form most atomic nuclei. That process is strange enough that it deserves its own episode, especially because it was this very question, how are atomic nuclei held together, that led to the discovery of both the strong and the weak forces in the first place.
See, at least one of the things that I've learned within listening to a lot of smart physics people, sometimes one of the most important things you could try to figure out is the proper question. Because I think Thad had told me that Einstein at one point, Professor Einstein, he was asked, it's like, Professor Einstein, how would you solve this problem that if it wasn't solved, like the Earth would be destroyed or something like that? You have 1 hour. How would you go about it? I believe he calmly responded, I'd spend 55 minutes assembling the correct question, something along those lines. And he's like, and then I would spend 5 minutes solving it. Because if you actually know what you're trying to figure out, if you're just taking shots in the dark, yeah, if you got enough technology, data, and somebody you throw a bunch of money at, you'll probably be able to figure some stuff out. But if you know very precisely what you're looking for, maybe you can do it a lot more efficiently. I don't know. Well, the thing is, I meant to say earlier, when he said it was a quirk, he's talking about quarks. I see what you did there, sir. Well played, Matt. Okay, we continue.
But this is also the story of the meson, the obscure cousin of the proton and the neutron that, while less known, is just as essential to the existence of all complex matter in the universe.
Oh, they have a hexagon for the meson. Was that intentional? Please tell me it was intentional. I don't care. I'm going to assume it was intentional.
Our story starts with Hideki Yukawa, a young physicist who graduated from the university.
I apologize for my racism, but was this guy involved with Godzilla at one point? I know, it's so stereotypical. And there's probably another Yukawa. I'm just going to stop talking right now. I don't know. I love Japanese culture, at least as far as that way. Yeah. I apologize for our Japanese friends in the audience, and anyone else that may come across this video. I do this a lot. I'm sorry. Continue.
Of Osaka in 1929, before moving back in with his parents and
Welcome,
working
Purple.
for no money as a university assistant. Due to the Great Depression, not because he wasn't a great
He was a
physicist.
smart dude.
All the while, Yukawa was focused on the problem of how nucleons stick together. He was perplexed about why a force so
We
strong
have Mr.
shouldn't be
CCDB has
observable
added a
outside
correction.
atomic nuclei. Yukawa had one intriguing clue to the inner lives of nuclei.
Full disclosure, I want to stay in that hotel at some point. If I go to Japan, I want to stay in the Godzilla hotel. Because I'm sorry, I'm such a weeb. I ain't in the closet no more. I don't think I was ever in the closet for that.
Nuclei, and that was beta decay. the
Go on.
tendency of large nuclei to occasionally spit out an electron, and in the process convert one of their neutrons to a proton.
So basically, apparently when a neutron is not part of some molecular composition, if it's out on itself, for some reason, about 14 minutes, what was it, like 836 seconds, something like that, 40, 41. I'm not saying I did some calculations on Wolfram Alpha. I may have done some calculations on Wolfram Alpha. I didn't see anything. At least that was interesting to me. But basically, a neutron by itself, okay, when it decays, it goes into, like, you got your proton, which some people say protons decay. Do they ever decay? Well, maybe after 10 to the 34, it'll far long, like, what is it, like a septillion times longer than the universe as we know it has existed. It's a long time. Basically, yeah, you get a proton, an electron, an antineutrino. Why is it an antineutrino? Now, I'm not saying somehow things get together, and that's basically like, I don't know, the key pin in the hole, kind of like if you're working with like a lock set, you have that very straight, long thing that you push in here, and eventually it's a lock set thing. Nobody clipped that. But all I'm saying is, okay, the key pin or whatever it is. I haven't done maintenance. I was a terrible maintenance dude. I'm just saying. But essentially helps keep a very intricate structure together. What happens when that intricate structure comes apart? Maybe you kind of get an antiparticle. Just speculation on my part. It's, yeah. It's a lot of interesting stuff and things, but continue.
He knew that the electromagnetic force is communicated by the exchange of photons, and so it stood to reason that this nuclear force should be mediated by some particle.
That means light.
So what if this particle was the electron, and beta decay was the side effect of the...
And light, I don't know. It seems to have something to do with heat as well. We can apparently measure the temperature of light. I learned that from Professor Keating.
the exchange of electrons between nucleons, like if protons and neutrons were playing catch with the electron and sometimes they fumbled the ball. It turns out this is totally not what's happening, but the insight that forces should be mediated by a particle was new in its time, and it eventually led Yukawa to the right answer.
That might also be why I think gravity kind of confuses us, because at least to my knowledge, again, could be completely wrong, we've been searching for the graviton. It's like, oh, there's going to be a force exchange particle, because that's how everything else works. But as far as I understand, according to general relativity, it's like, no, it's not necessarily a force, it's an effect of the curvature of space-time. Seems like a force to us, or at least observers like us. Basically, I don't know, maybe it's just 'cause I'm a crazy person, and I was blessed enough to go to Discovery Zone as a kid, and they had like this 10-foot high room with all these different cables strewn across. It was kind of elastic band, so like, I don't know, when people are like, it's not just the world sheet, it's like many world sheets, it's a complete thing. I'm like, that just makes sense to me, except instead of me going down, because I was a bit of a burly little kid, yeah, it would be like, everything is just coming into the most dense point. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is, but I can try to imagine it. I kind of imagine it kind of like Goku powering up in Dragon Ball. It's like you got all that energy and stuff is going towards you, and the ground starts to crack and everywhere except around. Maybe that actually makes more sense. Actually, I think this is making a lot more sense to me now. Oh, God. Will anime help explain more physics? Stay tuned for the next episode. We continue. Hey, Snacks. Thank you for joining my... Oh, we're going to talk so nerdy at PAX. Continue, Mr. O'Dowd.
An exchange particle with mass, unlike the massless photon, is a great first step for making a short-range force. These exchange particles are what we call virtual particles, which we've discussed before.
Okay. Can I just point out a wee bit of the irony? We're talking about virtual particles on this virtual world of stuff and things called the internet. Oh my God, I stopped it on a void-like screen. What a terrible host. But it's okay.
Virtual particles can sort of break the laws of physics in the sense that they can pluck the energy needed for their existence out of nowhere.
But wait. Did he just say it seemed to break the laws of physics? It plucks the stuff it needs out of nowhere. Is that magic? We continue.
as long as they give it back again. This is a result of
it basically just don't be like a, okay, you can be a taker backer. So you can be a total giver, but as long as there's a taking backing of stuff, I don't know, that Rugrats episode confused me.
Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which in one form says that we can never know both the energy and the duration of a phenomenon to better than a certain tiny accuracy. That means, for very short periods of time, the amount of energy in a
Long story short, my knowledge is, since we're doing something that perturbs a very delicate system, at least with our instruments now as we have it, we only really know so much. So, can we beat the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? Walter White may disagree.
patch of space can vary. Mass is a form of energy, so a virtual particle can briefly gain mass from nothing. But the more mass it has, the less time it can exist. Yukawa used the electron.
Oh, so that's kind of like, what was it? We got the electron, but then we got the muon. Those exist for like 5 milliseconds. We got a tau, which exists for a heck of a lot less. It's even more massive. Was it muon is like, what is it, like 200 so times heavier than an electron? Something like that. It's like, that shouldn't make sense. I'm just like, well, what if it just has more energy? I mean, everything would be the same. It would just be more massive for just a little bit of time. Again, you have to run the scales and stuff like that, and where does it go? I don't know. Does vacuum fluctuations happen? Just be careful. You might wake up Schrodinger's cat. We continue.
Mass to calculate the strength and range of a force that could be mediated by the electron, assuming that it was travelling at near the speed of light. The resulting force turned out to be around only 1/200th of the strength needed to hold the nucleus together, and had a range much larger than the size of the atomic nucleus.
Okay, what does all this mean? Pardon. Try to be gracious of your audience, but all right. Mass of the electron, the speed of, okay. So we got the thing over here. What is it? Now, I don't really know quantum chromodynamics, but I guess, all right. Get this stuff. What's it doing? It's doing these things. It's a little g. It looks like Euler's number, or probably the charge of the electron. I don't know. Minus lambda, yada, yada. All right, we got some stuff doing some things. It's calculation. His calculation was off, but once you actually have a method that can work, all right, let's get some more data. Let's start to adjust the equations, stuff, and things that we know. Continue.
So the electron couldn't really be the particle mediating this nuclear force. But Yukawa now had an equation that described the type of force he wanted. He adjusted the equation to describe a force with the appropriate strength and range, and found that it required a much more massive exchange particle.
Oh, he adjusted the
He called
parameters.
this hypothetical particle the meson, from the Greek mesos for middle, because it had to have a mass somewhere between the masses of the proton and the electron. Yukawa also...
Again, shout out to the physics community for coming up with some of the such greatest names ever. It's like, we're going to call it the middle one, the meson. And we're going to fit it into the standard model. Remember, the internet and the science community also brought us the SS Bodie McBoatface. I'm just saying. We continue. Welcome, Noel.
predicted that these particles had to have electric charge. Just like with beta decay, a neutron could emit a negative meson and transform to a proton, or a proton could emit a positive meson and transform to a neutron, and the neutral meson could be exchanged between protons or between neutrons. As a result, Yukawa predicted 3 meson types, one for each possible charge value. Unfortunately, this new theory didn't explain beta decay at all. In fact, Yukawa reasoned that beta decay required a completely different nuclear force, much weaker than the one holding the nucleus together.
Guess what they called it, Matt?
In fact, he correctly predicted the existence of both the strong and the weak forces at the same time.
Thank you. Again, maybe it's just subconscious. I've listened to this video a few times, and these are the things that pop up in my head as these things happen. But here's the thing. Infinity can be a very fickle thing at times. Apparently there's different types, and I don't know. What I learned from Professor Carroll was that if you're dealing with infinity as far as time goes, or eternity, that's a long time. A lot of things can happen. Just saying.
Although the weak force isn't really mediated by electrons, and we have videos explaining everything you probably want to know about it. Yukawa published his theory in 1935, and it was almost completely ignored.
That's never happened to anybody.
Proposing the existence of two new forces of nature was an extraordinary claim, and such claims require extraordinary evidence.
Nobody would ever do that.
No one was going to believe this until we detected a meson. These days, we routinely create countless mesons by smashing atoms together in our particle accelerators. But back then, particle accelerators were just being developed, so we had to rely on...
Okay. It looks like a carburetor. I don't know. Okay, a little bit of fuel injection there. It looks like fuel injection. I apologize to my folks in the automotive community. Or any motor community. That looks like Star Trek or something. I don't know. Actually, no. It looks like The Expanse. It looks like something in that one of the big space stations there. Oh my god. All the lights and the cables and the... I'm sorry. My ADD's kicking in. We continue. Awesome one, not for this stream. Maybe later.
Cosmic rays. These are high-energy particles that rain down on the Earth from natural space particle accelerators like supernovae and quasars.
It's like I want to go Jesus do
Yukawa
attacks.
wrote a letter to Nature magazine explaining why cosmic radiation could contain mesons, hoping to inspire other researchers to look for these, but his letter was rejected. Nonetheless, others had independently thought of searching for new particles in cosmic radiation. We have Biba Chaudhry and Debendra Mohan Bose, for example, who developed a method using photographic plates. They set these up at high altitudes in India.
I mean, that seems like such a smart thing. It's like, all right, well, we have a very specific thing we need to detect. How do we detect it? Well, if we try to measure it, well, then again, we probably didn't really have a choice back then. It's like, let's use some film. Let's see what happens to the film. Makes sense to me.
And Tibet, due to the fact that our atmosphere is so
Maybe
good
it's because I
at
grew up
locking
with a
cosmic
Polaroid,
rays,
so it's like...
which is annoying if you're a particle physicist, but great if you're anyone else. And Chaudhry and Bose did indeed spot the meson at around the mass Yukawa predicted. Sadly, their research went mostly unnoticed until British scientists independently found mesons in 1947. Anyway, not only were these new...
So the people that discovered it, nobody really paid attention. Well, back in the day, it's like, how would you know? It was published in somebody's PhD thesis. It was published in this thing. I don't read that language. Isn't this why we have, like, archive and stuff like that? And all the internet so we can try to seek this information out? I have no idea. Ooh, CERN or Battlestar. I've not watched that yet. I hear good things. I still need to finish Babylon 5. But we continue.
New particles at the right mass range. There were 3 of them, just as predicted by Yukawa, 1 positive, 1 negative, and 1 neutrally charged. But then things got kinda...
Sounds kind of like a triangle-ish.
Over the next couple of years, thanks to better particle accelerators and improved understanding of radiation, more and more mesons were discovered, with a range of properties. The first mesons, the ones found by Bose and Chaudhry, are called pions. And these are the particles actually exchanged by protons and neutrons in the nucleus. But there are many others. Kaons, eta mesons, D mesons, B mesons, etc.
What? Oh, we got a lot of mesons there. Continue.
And to make matters worse, scientists also found more particles that could exchange mesons, just like protons and neutrons could. These particles were named baryons, after the Greek word for heavy. There was the lambda.
Again, shout out to physics for naming it. We're gonna go with the Barry thingy. Why? It means heavy. Why? These are the heavy things we found. Continue.
the sigma, the xi, the omega, and more.
What?
Again, all with different masses, charges, and spins. This endless collection of baryons and mesons came to be known as the particle zoo, and it was a huge problem for physics at the time. According to Yukawa's theory, the atomic nucleus only needs 2 baryons, the proton and the neutron, and 3 mesons, the pions.
Yeah.
So what was with all of this extra junk that nature doesn't seem to use?
Wait. So what you're saying is, when we took some particles and we hurled them against each other at really high speeds relative to observers like us, some weird stuff happened? Imagine my shock. Continue.
Use outside of particle accelerators. This problem was finally solved by Murray Gell-Mann, who realized...
Oh my God, that was the guy that invented quarks that shared an assistant with Professor Richard Feynman, who apparently always made fun of the way this guy spoke. Oh, poor Professor Gell-Mann, I'm sorry you got trolled so much. Continue.
Mesons and baryons are not elementary particles, but rather made up of quarks. Hadron is the general name for a particle made of multiple quarks. The particle zoo just results from all the quark combinations that are possible. We covered this in our episode on quantum chromodynamics, but here's a quick refresher so we can get to the punchline.
This is where it starts getting... Okay. Now, full disclosure... I'm totally a Slytherin. I got a scaly avatar. I'm just saying that I enjoy Harry Potter. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I was on Tim's Harry Potter streams. I totally want to be the most powerful wizard the internet has ever seen. You got to be full disclosure here. I'm just saying this next part seems like magic. Continue.
Video. With the discovery of quarks, it was clear that we needed the strong force to not only hold the nucleus together, but also hold nucleons together. In fact, the latter is what the strong force really does. Binding nucleons is sort of an afterthought and not quite directly what the strong force does.
Okay, so this is fascinating because this is one of the things that confused me before, because they'd say the strong force, but then sometimes they'd be like, well, it's what holds like protons and neutrons together. I'm like, okay, it's something that's really strong. It's like, well, there's also the strong force that holds like the quarks together, that creates the things that it's holding together. So I'm like, wait, what? Aren't they saying the same word? One is the strong force, the other is the strong nuclear force. Again, on the cutting edge of naming stuff and things. Continue.
So, just as electromagnetism works on things with electric charge, the strong force works on things with color charge. There are 3 types of color charge, unlike the single type of electric charge. A quark, for example, could have a color charge of red or green or blue, or the opposite color charges.
I have to point out, I'm sorry, I'm being nitpicky, but I'm pretty sure we have positive and negative, just because, good old Uncle Ben Franklin took a shot in the dark. And I'm not saying that he may or may not have... That story is true about him flying a kite with a key. It got struck by... All I know is, if I was flying a kite and got struck by lightning, and I'd be like, that's electricity, I would probably view that as a very negative experience. I'm pretty sure it's actually positive. I'm not saying that would affect anything with how we do many things. I don't know. We continue.
Of anti-red, anti-green, or anti-blue. These names, by the way, are just analogies. Composite particles need to be color neutral, so the 3 quark baryons have 1 of each color charge which cancel each other out, while the 2 quarks of a meson have a color and its anti-color. These quarks are bound by the strong force, which is mediated by a massless particle called the gluon. Gluons each carry 1 regular and 1
It's a spinny thing.
charge,
It's a spinny thing.
and they cause the colors of quarks to flip when absorbed.
Oh,
Baryons
what?
and mesons are held together by a continuous exchange of virtual gluons.
Wait. Virtual gluons? Is he saying that they aren't even real? Go on.
But wait a minute. haven't we been saying the entire time that the reason the strong force has a short range is because it's transmitted by mesons with mass?
I think it might actually be quantum
That
spin.
was Yukawa's whole deal, but now it turns out that mesons aren't
Oh
the
my
real
God.
exchange particles of the strong force,
I
and
would
the
totally
real
do
ones,
that.
the gluons, don't have
The
mass.
gluon.
What's
Best
going
flavor.
on? Actually, the color neutral hadrons can't even feel the strong force directly, just as electrically neutral objects don't exert an electrostatic force on each other. But there is a workaround. Atoms seem electrically neutral from afar, but if you are close enough to the nucleus, you would feel its positive electric charge.
This is where it gets
Similarly,
kind of
if
crazy.
protons or neutrons get close
Alright.
enough to each other, their internal quarks will feel each other's presence.
Oh,
A quark from, say, a proton will want to tug at a quark from a neighboring neutron.
so they feel an
But they
attraction.
can't simply exchange a gluon to do that, because
Oh, that would
gluons
be
have
rude.
color charge, so exchanging a gluon would cause the hadrons to no longer be color neutral, which is not
Oh, it
allowed.
needs to stay within
In
it.
order to properly feel the strong force, the hadrons need to exchange a neutral particle, and nature has found a way to make that happen.
Oh.
Here's how it goes. A pair of
Wait,
nucleons...
okay, so apparently, now again, a conjecture on my part, general principles that we try to use, the principle of least action, and just what things are kind of, whatever the underlying ruleology, that kind of just defines what's going on. Let's see what's going on. Let's see how nature plays out.
get close, and a quark
Okay.
from one gets pulled towards the other.
All right.
Its gluon connection to the other quarks in its nucleus, what we call
Oh.
a flux tube, extends and snaps, and in the process generates two new quarks.
What?
One remains in the nucleus, while the other forms a quark-antiquark pair with the original escaped quark. This is our meson, our pion. It's
Wait. Something just gets formed? It comes out of literally nowhere? It chills? It doesn't... Go on.
color neutral, so it can be absorbed by the second nucleus without breaking any physics. There, one of the meson's quarks annihilates with an antiquark counterpart in that nucleus. Ultimately, we're left with two nucleons of the same type that we started with, but they've now communicated the strong force.
Okay. I can neither confirm nor deny babies get born that way, but... That seems crazy! You literally... Alright, this thing goes out, something else appears where you were, you get something else that's like an imaginary particle, a virtual particle that comes out, you shoot on over, you end up annihilating something else, and that's how they come together. And apparently that's how we get here. Oh my god, that actually probably is how babies are made. I have to discontinue my subscription to Stork Monthly. Full disclosure, that was a total lie. I never had a subscription to Stork Monthly. Continue.
Did it in a roundabout way, but the process nonetheless exchanged energy and momentum, binding the particles together. This is how the strong force finds its way around its lack of a neutral gluon. It cobbles together a neutral exchange particle, the meson. But the meson has mass. A virtual meson has to borrow
Welcome,
a
Jack
lot
and
of energy
Kotov.
to create its own mass, and so the uncertainty principle says that it can't exist for very long. Its range defines the possible size of an atomic nucleus. If a nucleus gets too big, then its nucleons are too far apart to exchange mesons effectively, and it'll decay. By the way,
Oh, so it goes, oof.
when we talk
Oh. Alright. So once you get out of mesonic range, eventually the particle, or the molecule at that point, goes, oof, no. Atom. It would be atomina. Because we haven't gotten the molecules. I don't know. I'm just going up to... I want to say carbonadium because of Deadpool 3, but all I know is... Yeah, it's oganesson, or element 118. That seems to be the limit right now. Why is it 118? I know Jen and Thad have some ideas. There seems to be some pretty cool overlap. Is it true? I have no idea. Might explain a lot. I don't know. We're working on it. But continue.
about the force between quarks, we call it the strong force, But this residual strong force that exists between nucleons is called the strong nuclear force. You know, this reminds me of our episode about quasi-particles. In that episode, we talked about how fields can arise as emergent behaviors of other fields, and these...
So stuff happens, and then things occur. Makes sense to me.
Quasi-fields will have their own quasi-forces and quasi-particles. Well, that's sort of what's happening here. The strong...
Well, to be fair, I mean, isn't that contrast? Where it's like, all right, well, because I thought about this. Maybe it's because I was a TV guy for a while. It's like, if you turn your gamma all the way up, you have the blindingly white brightness. Just if there's no differentiation, you're essentially blind. Maybe you're seeing something, and if they just have all just pitch darkness, if there's no light, then you have nothing else to contrast. I don't know. Just my thoughts as a dude on the internet. Continue.
Nuclear force is a quasi-force mediated by a quasi-particle, the meson. Without this little quirk of nature, this emergence of a force that's not really supposed to be there, the most complex atom in the universe would be hydrogen. Fortunately, nature...
I mean, I could totally... If you know where if he has a paper, or if that's just something he said... Oh, I've been meaning to reach out. I needed to thank him too, and then it just got so long and I felt embarrassed. I need to reach out to Jonathan. It's been over a year. Say that again about hydrogen. What did you say?
This emergence of a force that's not really supposed to be there, the most complex atom in the universe would be hydrogen. Fortunately, nature stumbled on a way to bind the nuclei, which gave us chemistry and biology and ourselves, including a young physicist named Hideki Yukawa, who was able to figure out some of the most important forces from which emerges this richly complex space-time.
There we go. All right. That was actually really fun. It's terrible. I apologize, Professor Carroll. This really wasn't a reaction video. I had already kind of listened to and watched the video a couple of times. See, again, I'm not meeting expectations. I'll try to actually go through some papers and stuff like that. If I have Wolfram Alpha and enough different things, we should be able to do some interesting stuff. Hey, welcome, Gap. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. LARPing for... Here's the thing. A lot of my views on what's going on between different folks, I just steal a lot of stuff from particle physics. I'm like, what happens if you have two highly charged particles of like different spins come together? They annihilate and release a whole bunch of energy. Now, I'm not saying that's partially why I'm like, well, if people really want to go at it and things get potentially legalized dueling, I think it's a terrible idea, but it might solve a lot of problems. Again, I totally just ruined the video for a lot of my pacifist friends here, but these things happen. But that's all I got right now. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for anyone who may watch in the future. And to Professor Carroll, I'll try to do better next time. So, peace out, everybody.
Have you guys checked out the Memes of Destruction's channel? He's an interesting dude. I like